it takes a lot of energy to remain hopeful when things seem so overwhelming. So stay angry, stay full of love.
I'm Colin Burrows, and this is the Woodstein Media Podcast, episode 27. This podcast is produced on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe, and Odawa peoples. On this episode, I talked to Jill Clair, who many people may know as the singer of Mall Crimes, and she is the first guest to make a return appearance on this podcast. You can listen to her talk about mall crimes on episode 4. But Jill also produces zines, tackling topics that she deems worthy of more research. In September, she released Legalize It, a zine about magic mushrooms. This is a topic I am also interested in, so although neither of us claim to be experts, we dove into a conversation about the benefits of mushrooms, how we'd like to see medical and recreational use legalized, and how people can contact their federal representatives here in Canada about issues they would like to see action on. So, even if you have no interest in the benefits of mushrooms, you might be able to find some information on how you can get your local MP to do some work for you. You are employing them, after all. And I want to just say off the top, if you don't know what mushrooms to pick, don't go picking and testing yourself, because you could very easily poison yourself. Check the description wherever you are listening to this to find out how to support the musicians played. Most of the songs will be shroom related, but I will cap it off with some mall crimes. This podcast and Woodstein Media are independently produced journalism that you can support through Patreon or by donating through PayPal at woodstein.ca. That's WOOD-STEIN.ca. Thanks for your interest and support. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support it by listening to more episodes and liking, sharing, subscribing, or reviewing them. This is very helpful and appreciated. That was Neighborhood Shrooms by Pennsylvania's Ass Feet from the album Catastrophe. And it took me more time to tell you about it than it took the band to play it. Today, instead of focusing on mall crimes, we'll be focusing on psilocybin and shrooms. Now, with you being on stress leave, I guess I just have to ask, have you been self-medicating to deal with the stress?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question. And the answer is an enthusiastic yes. So I'm someone who also is on antidepressants, which is like completely the move for me, has been like really, really helpful for me. I just started taking them like earlier this year, actually. But with psilocybin having this place in kind of a gray market right now, and with their access as a result of that being a lot more direct than they have ever been previously for me anyway, yeah, I've definitely been self-medicating a little bit, and it's been amazing. It's been hugely, hugely beneficial.
Okay. For me, I'm undiagnosed now. Like I was diagnosed with depression in my early 20s, but now I'm almost 50, and what I was being medicated with in my early 20s wasn't working for me. I probably should bring that conversation back up with medical professionals, but I haven't. I've just found my own way through life. But recently I've been using shrooms as well, and it is one thing where the lasting effect, it's been totally positive for me. And I come out of it, and I mean, the trip itself is one thing. It's separate from that lasting effect that psilocybin can have. So we'll get into the zine and what you were bringing up in that. And Actually, there's one line you bring up because it's a very good point, but I always kind of laugh because I almost see for myself that it's the opposite. But you talk about people with terminal illnesses using psilocybin to help face the anxieties about dying. But
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of other people with mental illness or that sort of thing, it's helping them face the anxieties of living. That would be what I find in it. And I find it fascinating that it's two sides of the same coin because it for people with terminal illnesses, it's still an anxiety. They might have a more definite reason for why they're terrified all the time, but it's still two sides of the same coin with that. And it's just an interesting point to me that, and I don't know where the question was that I was, okay. I guess we'll probably just be shooting the shit about mushrooms for this. That was Shrooms by Asheville, North Carolina's Kitty Tsunami. Do you want to just start off and talk about, you're not a professional on this, you're not an expert, but talk about you and your introduction to psilocybin mushrooms and what inspired you to write the zine.
Amazing. So my name's Jill Clair, she, they, and I have a background in library science, which I only bring up because if you go through library school, it equips you with some pretty good research skills. And while my day job doesn't often present me a lot of opportunities to do a lot of research, I have found an outlet with zine making to get some like moderate level research done. And so in the past, I've done stuff on repealing the sex ed curriculum in Ontario, on safe injection sites, on the 1492 Land Back Lane movement. And my most recent research zine project was investigating psilocybin because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't legal. So I, dedicated like a few hours into feeling the history in Canada and where it's at in terms of legalization. And I feel the real impetus for this was there is a dispensary in London, Ontario. It's one of the Fun Guys dispensaries, which are all over the country right now, which is amazing. And just sort of like, as we were talking about at the hop, just having this like almost immediate access to psilocybin has been amazing. It's been really helpful for me. I think, like, looking back, the first time I ever tried magic mushrooms, I was 22, 23, I want to say, and I was at a festival with some friends, and a friend had some, and it was like this really positive experience festival in this field in the country of like Eastern Ontario, and it was this like really positive experience. And so I've always kind of hung on to that, sort of like fast forwarding a bit and having like a formal diagnosis of depression and general anxiety disorder, and speaking with a lot of pals who have similar mental health situations. Like, the consensus is overwhelmingly, this is so helpful for me. Microdosing is good for my anxiety, it's good for my social anxiety, it helps with my depression. There was a friend I was speaking to about this several months ago over the summer who talked a lot about how not exclusively using magic mushrooms, but just the use of hallucinogenics in general can be really conducive to ego death, which he explained to me was kind of like almost being able to remove your bias from every situation, which I thought was so interesting. So that's sort of something I've been keeping kind of in my back pocket as I've been self-medicating. Yeah, I think that lays the groundwork pretty well. That's the deal.
Okay. You've done quite a bit of research here, and you mentioned how it was legal here until 1974, and the war on drugs in the US, the Food and Drugs Act here. Now, we'll see where I end up with this, because I've been talking to a lot of people involved in harm reduction, and this ends up tied into that. But it seems like when we make progress on these things, there's always a backlash. And like right now out in BC, there's huge backlash happening on the work that groups have been doing to push safe supply, and the work that's being done on decriminalization out there is being pushed back. So when it comes to the work that is being done for decriminalization of mushrooms, and you even go into, there's an example you cite throughout this about the case where a man in Saskatoon, I believe it was allowed to, it wasn't self-medicating, was it? He was
Yeah,
in...
he was the first person in Canada to be approved for therapeutic use of psilocybin.
Partway through that, he was stopped, and it was never approved for him to go back to it. And he was using it for the end of life anxiety so that he could maintain his mental health and still continue to help his family. And I think it's going to get worse, because it's looking like we might get conservatives in. I can't really tell for the rest of the country, because I live in like a conservative wasteland here. So I always know that it's going to be conservatives next time.
They're so lucky to have you, Colin.
I hope so.
They are.
I'm just thinking about what people can be doing. We'll talk about the writing of your MP later, because you do that really well in here. But separate from that, when there's this, we get some progress, it gets pushed back. What do you think at a grassroots DIY level? How can we stay positive about things when there's always that backlash or pushback?
Such a good question. And certainly, like, as a depressed person, staying positive, something that does not come natural to me. But I will say that I think talking about it is, I think, on a day-to-day level, one of the most useful things you can do, like specifically engaging people in discussion and then embracing your community. I think this is something, like, especially post-lockdown, folks are maybe a little out of practice with, is leaning on your support network. Also something that I think a lot of people, the idea of accepting help or needing help makes them very uncomfortable. But I truly think the best way to remain positive, remain loving, but also full of rage is to participate in your community and open your heart up to people and just be prepared to have conversations that might take you to an uncomfortable place. My strategy when navigating those conversations that can be uncomfortable is, just do your research, right? Spend a few hours, read all about it. Like, a resource I have returned to again and again, the Health Canada website has a whole write-up on magic mushrooms and psilocybin, including all of the ways that you can access it legally. And I'm sure we'll get into that because it is very fraught, but that's a pretty reputable resource for information. Because psilocybin is still technically illegal for recreational use, there are some legal scholars you can find who have written their think pieces on why they think it's so silly that psilocybin was ever made illegal in the first place, because there are species of magic mushroom that are indigenous to Canada. It's just growing in Durham, right? I was listening to this interview about how the best way to stay committed to a cause is love and rage. When people give way to despair and cynicism, that's when you see people drop off, right? It takes a lot of energy to remain hopeful when things seem so overwhelming. So stay angry, stay full of love.
Okay. I like that. And that was another song called Shrooms. This time it was by Emiliano Pando-Ponce. You brought up there the few ways where you can access psilocybin in Canada. And then right after that, we'll maybe touch on your advice for people who are using it for the first time. So, yeah, let's start with what you found from the Government of Canada website for how we can get it.
Yeah. So the Government of Canada will cite 3 ways that you can access it legally. You can be part of a clinical trial. You can apply to Health Canada to get an exemption for, and this is all from medicinal use. I should specify medicinal therapeutic use.
Yep.
So the second way is you can apply to get an exemption, and then under the observation of like someone trained in, I think it's like trained in psychedelics, you can ingest it for therapeutic reasons, which is what the like first case in Canada, that was what was going on there. He got an exemption. And then the third way is if you're someone who has been not seeing results from antidepressants or antipsychotics for an extended period of time, you can get a different kind of exemption where you can source psilocybin from other parts of the world, because there are certain countries where it's never been illegal, or it has recently been made legal, I believe. I think one of the examples I bring up in that zine is Jamaica, psilocybin fully legal, and they even have a bit of a tourism industry built around it. So people can book retreats at some of these psilocybin centers, and the purpose of the retreat is like ingesting a certain amount of psilocybin over the period of time you're at the retreat, which, like, I don't know, it was just kind of a fun detail. I want psilocybin to be decriminalized for recreational use for not these reasons, but it is interesting to point out how there is all this industry that can result from, decriminalization, from legalization of psilocybin, that we're not even exploring because we, quote unquote, don't understand the long-term effects of, ingesting psilocybin. But at the same time, we do, because people have been using psilocybin since forever because it grows naturally. I think another part, and I think it's explored in the zine too, I can't remember if I included this, pre-contact South American indigenous groups, because there are a lot of psychedelic mushrooms that grow in that part of the world. It was like just part of the society. So it's said, obviously, there aren't any written records of this period, and the information has obviously been censored by colonization, but it used to be a significant part of daily life. And then with colonization, we've sort of lost this connection to this history that we've had. That's one example I found, but the fact that in most parts of the world there are some form of psychedelic mushrooms that grow, I think that's like something important to reflect on, because if we want to have a more respectful relationship with the planet, then obviously we're going to be sourcing our food from what's available around us. We'd be foraging for stuff like in our immediate vicinity. So, and then I guess, like, lastly, just my final point on this, like, yeah, illegal since 1974, right? Like,
yeah, that's just my lifetime, really.
Yeah. Oh,
took it away
is there a connection? Look at this baby. Something about this baby.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
My dad pushed that through. What a...
Mushrooms. Magic mushrooms, magic mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Jump on a magic mushroom, cook 'em up in a casserole, eat about a dozen then fly away to a land that's free from assholes. Mushrooms on my brain, making me insane. Oh, look out, here comes Elvis, wearing suspenders and a pink dress, floating through a field of magic mushrooms, floating through a field of magic mushrooms, dancing where the dragon looms, floating through a field of magic mushrooms. Under the mushrooms, creatures roam, especially happy little gnomes. Magic mushrooms, magic break. Green people know better, so drink its happy nectar. It's the fruit of the gods, and it's also meat for vegetarians. Stay out of life's rain, under my little umbrellas. World sucks, so just leave it. All you gotta do is eat it, eat it. Floating through a field of magic mushrooms, floating through a field of magic mushrooms, dancing where the dragon looms, floating through a field of magic mushrooms. Under the mushrooms, creatures roam, especially happy little gnomes. Oh, look out, here comes Kylie and her little sister Daddy. Magic mushrooms, magic mushrooms, magic mushrooms.
From Perth, Australia, that was Strange Juice with Shrooms. Have you paid attention to the court case, the defense for the guy who ran over the Muslim family in London? Have you paid attention to the defense?
You're gonna have to remind me. I was following that like as closely as I could. Obviously, with that news cycle, you would get like kind of an update every couple of months. But I know they did reach a decision.
Well, the defense used magic mushrooms for why he did it. They said he took some 2 days before, which, I mean, I've never had the experience where you're still tripping like that 2 days later, especially with the amount. They only said like 3 grams or something, and that is usually out of your body or out of your mind at least.
It's a macrodose, right?
6 to 12 hours, not 48 hours later. But the defense tried to use that as the reason, which, I mean, the prosecution, I do believe, proved that the science they were using was based on like opioids and how they attach to receptors and all that, and did not apply to magic mushrooms. But still, those ideas get pushed into people's heads as a negative, and the people who vote conservative will use that as a way to keep it from becoming legal, because those dangerous magic mushrooms. I mean, in that case, it was proven that this guy wanted to do that sort of thing. He was a racist. He was xenophobe. He had all kinds of problems, And maybe he did take mushrooms like 2 days before, but I don't think those put all those thoughts into his head.
You know, it's kind of a long-standing tradition of fear-mongering. I'm going to say from like conservative groups, it's certainly like, you know, liberals have their hand in that too, of citing these examples of like, I don't know, I think a really frequent story that like everyone heard was the urban legend about the person's brother who did acid one weekend and the family went away for a trip, and when they came back, the brother hadn't left the spot and was just sort of, you know, sitting in his own filth because he was so impossibly high. And I think this misinformation about drug use is just so damaging, obviously. And that's what it's the responsibility of a defense attorney is to orchestrate this this narrative, trying to prove the innocence of their client, right? And trying to,
or reasonable doubt.
Yeah, I think about what a blow this was when the van attacker in Toronto, like his defense lawyer was like, well, it's because he's someone with autism spectrum disorder, right? And how a lot of ASD activists came out and they were like, no, this has nothing to do with this person being autistic. This is purely someone who was full of hatred, who was, it seems very likely, radicalized by these very hateful, black-pilled online groups, because it's easier to just point to one thing that's deeply misunderstood and be like, well, it's this reason, instead of getting into the complexity and the nuance of these like extremely isolating, radicalizing groups. And then if you focus on like the ASD and not the intense isolation, the echo chamber effect, you know, you could even talk about how, this is getting a little off topic of psilocybin, but you know, if you're someone with an ASD diagnosis and you reach the 18, there's basically no services available for you anymore, right? You're kind of on your own. So,
and
you know,
on that, even before that, parents are having a hell of a time getting the services for their kids when they're young. So.
Just like fully like inadequate resources for people, which I don't know, really breaks your heart. For many years, I worked at a place that just partnered with someone who was an autism advocate, and as a result, like there were a number of people with ASD who worked there, and they were like, I don't know, like it was awesome, right? Obviously, this is like a very anecdotal, very personal experience, but the advocate that I worked with would talk a lot about like, you know, it doesn't matter how educated I am, doesn't matter how personable I am, 90% of people with autism with an undergraduate degree or some kind of like post-secondary education are unemployed because it's so difficult to enter the job market. And then the amount of money you're allocated on ODSP is not enough to live on. It's just like very frustrating. But we're talking about magic mushrooms today, which should be decriminalized. And I think it's the tendency, both of this defense lawyer, but of conservatives in general, to scapegoat an issue, because when there's fear, it's very easy to appeal to people's emotional reaction rather than getting into how we got to this place. Because someone doing something objectively evil is really difficult to look in the eye. If we can just pretend this is a person who had a psychotic episode caused by drugs, I don't know, I guess that's a comforting narrative to some, but that's not what happened.
other day. Smell was dreadful, said be careful. Walking out the door, I just had 2 handfuls. Tell you the truth, I don't know what to do, cause I just realised that I'd eaten blue shrooms. Felt my feet leave the grass and I start to fucking laugh. I'm no longer on this earth, how long will this last? Where the hell am I? On the moon! What did I take? Mushrooms! Am I gonna be alright? Probably not. What will my dad say? Fuck you! Where the hell am I? On the moon! What did I take? Mushrooms! Am I gonna be alright? Probably not. What will my mum say? Fuck you! Just got home and I'm really tripping balls. Brain feels weird and there's patterns on the walls. Walking on clouds and I'm trying not to fall. I cannot explain it, I ain't done these drugs before. But I'll go outside, have a cigarette to ease my mind. I'm feeling fine, notice everything between the lines. Redefine what it means to be a legend. Take shrooms, play guitar, call me Jimi Hendrix. Like, where the hell am I? On the moon! What did I take? Mushrooms! Am I gonna be alright? Probably not. What will my dad say? Fuck you! Where the hell am I? On the moon! What did I take? Mushrooms! Am I gonna be alright? Probably not. What will my mum say? Fuck you!
Also hailing from Australia and singing a song called Shrooms, that was Hype. Highpe. Say they're legal now, or you find a safe way to get them, and you're gonna have them recreationally. So trying magic mushrooms for the first time, you have advice in the zine. Do you want to go through some of that?
Totally. So whenever you're trying something new, I think it's really important to have someone you can reach out to in case things go a little sideways. So just have someone who knows what you're up to, like a trusted person who will take your call or who will respond to your texts. Even better, have someone around who, if you start feeling a little overwhelmed, if you start having, a bad trip, can talk you down, can reassure you, can help take your mind off things, help center you again. If you are doing, we've, I think, thrown these terms around a little bit, but just to clarify what both of these mean. So microdosing and macrodosing. Microdosing is when you take half a gram of mushrooms and you're going to see some very subtle effects on your mood, but mostly it's just going to be, you're maybe going to see elevations in your mood, in your ability to concentrate, less anxiety, which is so great, less depressed mood, wonderful. A lot of people microdose before they go into work. They get a lot more satisfaction out of the workday. It's a beautiful thing. If you're going to macrodose, which is taking a dosage to the point where you're going to see you're going to hallucinate a little bit or a lot. I have heard it said, take a macrodose after you've had a meal to get the best effects. Be prepared for some stomach discomfort,
You can take it with ginger if
Ooh, brilliant. Ginger, I've also heard ingesting it as a tea can help mitigate some of those tummy troubles. If you're able to, it is really fun to be on mushrooms and be outside, like go for a walk. It's also really fun to be on mushrooms and watch a movie and like stay in.
Colorful movies are
movies.
Yes.
Because Colin, just as you were saying earlier, like the effects do last for several hours, so just like keep that in mind. You're probably going to need the whole day. And I guess in terms of like aftercare, like how you're feeling the next day, I often feel like really, really good. There aren't really any like hangover effects, so to speak. You might feel like a little less sharp on the day after than you would normally. Sort of like if you got really, really high, like if you smoked a bunch of weed, similar to how you feel the next day. You're fine, but you're just like, oh, I'm a little bit more dumb today. That's good. Make time to be dumb.
Okay. Make time to be dumb. I always do that.
I'm waiting for the shrooms I took to kick in. Wait a minute, I think I'm starting to feel it begin. Layer by layer, reality gets slashed away by a perception-peeling knife. My body feels light, better than alright. I'm loving life. The walls start to breathe, reminding me that I should probably do the same. I take a deep breath and smile. I'm starting to trip, I proclaim. But then I start to flip when something catches the corner of my eye. Guys, did any of you just see that crimson red dragon fly by? Nothing but cross-eyed stares from around the room. My heart rate soars, but then it comes to a grinding halt when I realize I'm actually alone and outdoors. That's when a gentle breeze tickled my senses. With fresh air my lungs fill. I'm overfilled with an overwhelming sense of calm and just chill. Looking up, the sky is somehow both cloudy and crystal clear. I lay back and watch the trees dance, rocking like a chandelier. I think I'm starting to peak. My eyes are starting to hear, my skin is starting to speak. Like a whirlpool, my senses begin to integrate and swirl at an astonishing rate. While they twirl, my ego dissipates and I'm feeling great. I'm plugged into the universe, tethered to everyone and everything. What was that? Oh no, did my phone just ring? Hello? I say, and press speaker and wait for a reply.
You'll always be alone, you've got no soul, and you're gonna fucking die.
I resist the urge to curl up and cry. I don't even make a peep. I'm too busy trying to tell if this is a dream. It feels real, like REM sleep. Then I hear another voice, this one in a much more pleasant tone.
Your pure heart will live on forever. Fear not, you're never alone.
That makes me feel better. Maybe even better than okay. A blue jay sings in the distance, and once again, it's a good day. I think I'm coming down now. I'm not tripping anymore. Wait a minute. Yes, I am. Now it's even stronger. What the hell was that? Suddenly I'm more terrified than a boomer watching CNN. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot the crimson red dragon once again. I try to remember if red dragons are supposed to be evil or good. As if able to read my mind, it replied,
Us red dragons are often misunderstood.
It wrapped me up in its wing and gently tossed me on its back. As we soared into the sky, I had and then recovered from a quick heart attack. My new crimson friend flew me into space, circling the rings of Saturn, and we made our way back to Earth in a fractal-like zigzag pattern. I felt overwhelmed with joy that dragons and people can coexist.
No, we can't.
The dragon explained telepathically.
Because one of us doesn't exist.
For a while I thought he meant me and I became quite withdrawn. Then eventually I came down and the dragon was gone. Whew, that trip was wild as shit. Wait a minute. Am I still in the middle of it?
And we've tripped back across the sea from Australia, and that was, once again, a song called Shrooms. But this time, by Ellis Michaels from Boston. We're on to writing your Member of Parliament, which you sum the zine up with talking about how you wrote your own Member of Parliament and encouraging people to write to their Member of Parliament. How does someone do that?
Awesome. If you go to the Our Commons halcommons.ca website. You can find all the contact information for all of the MPs in Canada. So if you happen to live in the same area as me, West London, our MP is Ariel Kayabaga. She's a member of the Liberal Party. I contacted her after I'd finished this zine in late September because I knew I was going to be chatting with you today. I actually emailed her again yesterday. So the only response I've received from her office to date basically summarizes information on the Health Canada website about magic mushrooms, which was very unhelpful. But I think once you get their contact information, I think persistence is really important. You're going to have to follow up and follow up. Just, I think the nature of being an elected official, you hear from your constituents a lot, but you know what? That's the job. So reach out, be annoying, be persistent. My MP's little slogan is like, here for you. So, like, challenge accepted, Ariel. Respond to my emails, please. Another option is snail mail. So you don't have to buy a stamp if you're messaging your representative. You can just write their address on the envelope and throw it in the mailbox, which is pretty cool and something I also learned while researching for this zine. My most recent message with my MP's office, because I haven't received a response since early October, I CC'd the Minister of Health just because I'm not even looking for, the Liberal Party's specific stance on this issue at this point. I'm just wondering if they're going to support a large-scale study, which is constantly what they're citing, to move recreational use forward, we need to do this large-scale study, but there's no concrete plans to perform the large-scale study. And then just because I have been treated so well and because I've benefited so much from the magic mushroom dispensary in my neighborhood, I was also are people who are potentially facing charges for working in these dispensaries, are they going to get clemency when this is inevitably legalized? Because that's just frankly the direction we're going in. It might be in a few years, it might be longer, but I'm quite confident it's going to happen. I'm seeing a lot of the language that was used for cannabis legalization many years ago also being applied to magic mushrooms, namely we don't understand the long-term effects, or there's a few references I've seen to people having psychotic episodes on magic mushrooms, just like you can if you ingest cannabis and you have a history of psychosis in your family, if you're schizophrenic. So I guess just to summarize, so halcommons.ca, you can find your MP's information, send them a letter. You don't have to have a stamp. Send them an email. You're not going to get a response right away, but be persistent and recognize that it's the job of that person to respond to you as one of their constituents.
While I spend all day in my room, and I spend all day eating shrooms, and I like the smell of perfume, and the smell of flowers in bloom. Yeah, 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 yeah. While I spend all day in my room, and I spend all day eating shrooms, and I like the smell of perfume, and the smell of flowers in bloom. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And the music tripped back to Australia with Shrooms by Inbred from the album Ashes. Is there anything else you want to tell people? Most likely on the theme of magic mushrooms, but if there's something else you've got to say. I have one question, since I know you're in a band. Is there any crossover in mall crimes with, or is this kind of a separate life hobby? Is there any songs that you can attribute to, I was on mushrooms when I wrote that, or is there?
Well, you know what? I might have a few like kernels of songs that I have begun jotting down. There are several members of Mall Crimes who are very enthusiastic magic mushroom users. I don't know if we have any songs to date that are like a direct link, but stay tuned, because it seems like an inevitability. I think one of the things I really try to do with this band is point out things that I think are unfair, or I just like, I can't really wrap my mind around. So like why police exist, for instance, why we are allowing entire communities of people refusing access to potable water. It's another theme that's come up. And then hopefully the criminalization of psilocybin, which is really, really fucking stupid. So because I've been talking everyone's ear off about this prior and post making this zine, because, you know, that's really helpful when you're looking into a new matter. I find it really helpful to like engage people in conversation about it. So when like coffee, which is very addictive, is legal and actually very like condoned by the current system, right? Because it makes you a more attentive, a faster worker. Magic mushrooms, on the other hand, force you to take a perspective outside of your experience, to maybe reflect on your behavior more closely, to think of larger systemic issues. Like, not to say that's a guarantee, but that's something that can happen when you ingest psilocybin. So when looking at coffee, very legal, and psilocybin, currently very illegal, what is more conducive to a capitalist system, right? The one that makes you a better worker, or the one that has the potential to radicalize you? So that's sort of where I'm at, just doing mushrooms and thinking about capitalism.
Okay, maybe that's a perfect way of signing up. Doing mushrooms and thinking about capitalism. But so that's a positive, and then you're thinking about a negative, but the positive probably puts you in a positive space for thinking about that negative. Whereas if you're just thinking about capitalism without mushrooms, life can seem pretty overwhelming and shitty.
It's a bummer, man.
Yeah.
It's a total bummer. But yeah, just to like circle back, like we were talking about at the beginning of the interview, it's love and rage that bring us together and keeps our communities like strong, keeps us like compassionate for one another. It's not despair and cynicism. Although those things have their place, you know, feel your feelings fully, but
Quicker, quicker, bootlicker.
From their 12-inch EP, You Embarrass Me, on Cursed Blessings Records, that was Mall Crimes with Bootlegger's Delight Reprisal. As always, thanks for talking to me, and thanks for making the music you make. Or, I don't know how Mall Crimes works. They make the music, you make the words, whatever. It all works really well for me. I'm glad
Thank you
you're
so
doing
much.
it. So,
I'm really glad I'm doing it. Thank you so much for letting me talk about this thing. I'm very interested, and it's always such a pleasure, Colin. Wishing you the best.
same to you and all your bandmates and everyone else in London too.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hopefully I see you soon.
You're almost done shows for this year, right?
We're doing one December 8th in Hamilton, December 9th in Toronto, and then December 30th in London.
So that's like a pre-New Year's Eve kind of celebration.
Yep, New Year's Eve.
So maybe I can make it to one of those. I hope so.
That would be awesome.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Jill for the interview. Check the description on whatever platform you are listening to this to find out where to get music from the artists played on this episode. Visit woodstein.ca. That's WOOD-STEIN.ca. You can support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Colin Burrows. Like, share, comment, follow, and support Woodstein Media and this podcast, and have a wonderful day.
That's sort of where I'm at. Just doing mushrooms and thinking about capitalism.